issue as it's affecting South County cities. And as I was listening to everybody introduce themselves, I noticed a lot of you come from South County cities. The reason why I want that to be my focus today is not only because it's relevant, but because there's a different challenge in addressing homelessness in South County. And so to kind of illustrate that, I want to kind of give you a background on this homelessness issue and the litigation around this issue. I also want to talk about how some of the South County leaders have contributed to this problem, and finally give you ways in which you can elevate your voices on this issue and speak out for this issue as it affects your community. So for some background, there are probably 15,000 or so people that are sleeping on the streets that fit the HUD definition of homelessness, and that is a pretty conservative town.
Is it Orange County?
In Orange County, yeah.
Okay, and I was just South Orange County.
And this, but yeah, and you would think that the homelessness issue is relegated to poorer areas, but according to the Orange County point in time count, which is the annual count that's tied to HUD funding, South Orange County does have a sizable homelessness population. Homelessness is not really tied to income. It's tied most of all to rises in rent. And anybody could lose a job and become, displaced from their home as a result. Homelessness is an intersectional problem, and so it is a feminist issue because when women are trapped in domestic violence relationships and rely on their spouse for housing, obviously that it's a feminist issue. It's an LGBT issue because when young teenagers come out to their parents who then proceed to evict them because they've come out, they have that specific challenge as a result of their identity. It's a racial issue. You're obviously more likely to be discriminated against, more likely to face intergenerational poverty as a result of this color of your skin. So it's an intersectional problem, and so I would say no matter what your issue is, maybe your issue is the environment. It's an environmental problem as well, because with the lack of affordable housing, with more people commuting, living further from where they live, that increases pollution. So ironically, laws that have been put into place that purportedly to protect the environment and to prevent development have had a negative impact on the environment. So that's why there's talk about reforming laws like CEQA in California to do maybe carve-outs for affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. So even if your issue doesn't even seem related to housing and homelessness is a human rights issue, and it's an intersectional problem. And no matter what it is that you're passionate about, whether you're really passionate about feminism, the environment, LGBTQ issues, racial issues, you should be focused on homelessness, because no matter what background you come from, no matter what challenge you have, if you're a woman, if you're gay, if you're a person of color, and you're homeless, you objectively have it worse than anybody else from those backgrounds. Unfortunately, hundreds of people die every single year on our streets in Orange County, which is absolutely inexcusable. That we're one of the wealthiest counties and one of the wealthiest states and the wealthiest country in the world, and we have people dying on our streets as a result of homelessness. Another trend in Orange County that's hitting Orange County especially hard is our opioid crisis, which tends to cause people to deplete their wealth, lose the ability to maintain employment, lose their housing, lose a large degree of their autonomy as a result of their opioid addiction, which, as we all know, is part and parcel of the lack of regulation of our pharmaceutical industry, the overprescription of opioid drugs, the sheer lack of responsibility, frankly, by the pharmaceutical companies and their lobbyists, and that's what's caused this opioid problem, which again is killing an Orange County resident once every couple of days, which is insane to think about. I mean, if a couple people, if 3 or 4 or 5 people were dying, as a result of any other issue, as a result of exploding cars or some other really visual issue, really visceral problem, you would say, hey, we got to do something about those exploding cars. We got to do something about.
What should we do?
Well, you should understand. You should understand the extent.
I understand.
You should understand the extent and the severity of the problem.
Cut to the chase.
The lack of resources that are being provided to these people. And I think you also need some background on what rights do people who are experiencing homelessness have, and how have these rights been vindicated by our courts. So many of you might know of a pair of federal lawsuits that have been brought. The first lawsuit was brought in 2018, and it's before Judge David Carter. Judge David Carter is still presiding over that lawsuit. A second lawsuit was brought specifically naming South Orange County cities, and they were successful in recusing him from deciding that lawsuit because they were able to argue to a judge that he was biased because he's made statements in favor of homeless people. So they point out the fact that advocates who've appreciated his role in marshaling resources and facilitating and encouraging settlement, advocates have praised his work. Advocates have even painted a mural on the wall of a shelter and have said what a wonderful job that he's doing. He has also, by equal measure, criticized cities who have not been doing enough on homelessness, and because of his role in really being proactive and being one of the most effective leaders on this issue, yes, he's a judge, and yes, he has to decide these cases impartially, but because of his extrajudicial contacts with people experiencing homelessness, because he's been wanting to be proactive and actually visit encampments and actually talk to people and get a hands-on look, which is what I would think a good judge does as an attorney, is really be able to view issues in a more holistic way and understand them more comprehensively. Because of his posture and some would say his bias in favor of homeless people, he was recused. So he's no longer deciding this South Orange County lawsuit. So a lot of cities, I believe, cities that maybe a couple of you may be residents of, have hired one law firm called Jones Day. It's one of the biggest law firms in the world, and they are engaged in some, I would say, really expensive litigation, very, very aggressive litigation in defending the rights of cities to be able to criminalize homelessness. So that's what's at stake at these lawsuits, and that's what your city councils have decided to do. Is instead of saying, let's cut to the heart of it, let's settle these lawsuits, let's no longer criminalize homelessness, because what the law says and what's at issue in these lawsuits is, if there are more homeless people than there are shelter beds, it's unconstitutional to arrest people for being homeless because they don't have a choice, and therefore you're punishing them for the human act of sleeping, which is a biological function that we all have to engage. We're punishing people for their status and the conduct derivative of their status of being homeless, and it's unconstitutional. And that's what's happening. I don't think it's not in dispute whatsoever that there are no homeless shelters in the Woods, there's no homeless shelters in San Clemente. So again, for the domestic violence victims, for the teenagers that get kicked out of their house for being gay, for people that have been laid off from their work, is there a place to go in any of these South County cities? No. Absolutely not. What's the status quo? If somebody pitches a tent, if somebody gets complaints from neighbors for being homeless and for existing in any of these South County cities, the Orange County Sheriff's Department will visit them and threaten them with a camping citation, which even if they are not issuing the actual citation, the courts have held, the Ninth Circuit has held, even if they're not actually issuing the citations, but they're threatening enforcement, telling people to move along, that's also cruel and unusual punishment. And that's exactly what happens. You can even conduct this as an experiment yourself. Go to Pick 5, buy a tent, pitch it somewhere, and see how fast the police get called, and see how fast you're told to leave. That's the status quo. And what my call to action is encourage your city council members to not engage in protracted, immoral, and counterproductive litigation defending the right to criminalize homelessness. And what I'm personally disappointed in seeing is a lot of these elected officials, when they're campaigning and they're making their pitch, and you think that they're sounding genuine, and they're certainly coming around and taking photo ops with advocates and bringing donations to supply drives and things like that, and you get a chance to meet them as an advocate, and then you see them take office and do absolutely nothing on these issues. That is disappointing. And that applies to Democratic council members of these cities. So I would say that if you're involved at all in your local city council, if you can help me understand, the people who are influential in your cities, so the city council members and all the organizations and the powers that be in your cities, if you can help me and other advocates understand what these issues, what the dynamics are in your cities, that could also help further the cause of, again, it's as simple as do the right thing, follow federal law, stop spending endless sums on your Jones Day attorneys filing stupid motions, and actually start solving this problem. So that's my ask. So my name is Mohammed Aly. I'm on Facebook.
Where can they go to help you, to donate and to volunteer?
Yeah, the organization that I founded is listed on the agenda. It's Orange County Poverty Alleviation Coalition. If you'd like to go to the Facebook page and donate, there's a donate button on the Facebook page. If you'd like to get in contact with me, my number is listed on the Facebook page. If you don't use Facebook, you can simply just talk to me at the conclusion of this meeting, which was 10 minutes ago. So
sorry about that.
I'll leave it at there. But thank you so much.
And you also provide food. You do a lot of other efforts to help the homeless, right?
Well, yeah, because I do think that in order to do policy advocacy, we've got to understand what people are actually going through and understand the issue from their perspective. You can't get that perspective if you're approaching people empty-handed. And so just as a matter of empathy, but also as a matter of actually bolstering the legitimacy of our advocacy, we do engage in direct action and direct relief to people experiencing homelessness. And so if you wanted to volunteer in that respect,
what are you doing right now? Like, are you providing meals for people? Are you providing medical services? Volunteer from doctors or dentists?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not me. It's a movement, and it's a large group of volunteers that work. I mean, every single day they're either going to micro communities where people have been given housing, but maybe they're not given enough support, or going to shelters and making sure shelters are adequately run and adequately treating people and giving people what they need. And so, yeah, I mean, if you had any inclination whatsoever, any curiosity to, there's certainly, a few dozen people that I could introduce you to that are doing this work day in and day out. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I know of a couple of women who are actually doing it in Huntington Beach, and then there's the leading folks. What's that?
I work with Welcome In.
Oh, okay. Tahiti, we were down there, and every day at 4 o'clock?
It's
4:30. They come and people they come out of the bushes like animals, sort of like, I don't want to say this, but it's ridiculous. What we saw sailing in back from Catalina when we came into Long Beach the other day. There are people in the rocks. They're actually crawled into the rocks because you can't have a tent there, I assume, and you see pants and shirts and everything. People have laundered their clothes in the water, and then you turn around 180 degrees and you see these $5 and $6 million homes right across the way. And I mean, just the stark contrast blows your mind. But that's what we are faced with. That's who we are in Orange County.
And is any of our council members that are Democrats that have asked for our votes, asked for our volunteer hours and our efforts in canvassing, are any of them behaving any differently than Republicans? Absolutely not.
Do you have policy positions you put forward and want them to support?
Yeah, settle this lawsuit. Settle this lawsuit.
Okay.
That's it.
Right.
If you're Melissa Fox and you're a Democrat on the council in Irvine, if you're Farrah Khan and you're on the council in Irvine, if you're Tiffany Ackley and you're on the council in Aliso Viejo, act like a Democrat and show some compassion on the council.
And just for the record, for my live streamers, all of them are on my friends list and have access to this live stream as it's happening. And many of them were tagged and invited to attend this meeting tonight.
Well, thank you for allowing me again to speak, and I hope that you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.